RadioFiles. So we want to track some of our legends and some of our people who are in broadcasting. My name is Lee K. Some would know me as Leander Candiero. In fact, the other day I was in studio and I was calling myself Lee K, and then somebody wrote and said, so is Lee K Leander Candiero? So some people get confused about that, but it actually takes me to the special man that we have today in today's Tsimba, the RadioFiles. A man we know as Steve Vickers, but some of you would know as Mukwasha, and that's exactly where I want to start from. Welcome, Steve. Welcome, Mukwasha.
Thanks, Lee K. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege. We go back a long way, don't we? And
Absolutely.
It's great to have this opportunity.
I said I want to start from the Mukwasha title. The other time I was speaking to Mbofs, I was wondering if ever he's had an AKA. And he only came up with Mbofs. And we know that we know you as Mukwasha. So my question is, are you Mukwasha just on radio, or you are Mukwasha as in Mukwasha for real?
Yeah, that one title, it really does summarize myself, I would say, pretty much perfectly, because yes, I am a genuine Mukwasha. I was born in the UK in a city called Brighton. Brighton, the football team, currently playing in the EPL. I studied maths when I went to college, but went into radio after that. Did a teaching course as well, because I've always been good with teaching, helping people. And then had a chance to come to Zimbabwe because the country was recruiting teachers still as part of the post-independence education policy. That was 1993. By then they were still taking teachers from other countries to strengthen, especially in certain subjects like maths.
Sure.
So I came to this new country from the UK, discovered this amazing culture, this fantastic place, and fell in love with the country, and fell in love with a very special lady. Wow. As well, who's Telmore, and I did pay lobola for her back in 1996. That was on the 4th of February.
Wow, you remember?
Yeah, and that's 26 years ago. So I'm literally a Mukwasha, but I just love the Zimbabwean culture as well. So I've got this cross-cultural, interracial aspect of who I am, and that becoming a Mukwasha per radio, Mukwasha of the nation, it kind of summarizes as well, because through the power of radio we connect with so many people, and I'm able to do that in this cross-cultural way.
Wonderful. Saka toti titambire Mukwasha. So you paid lobola, saka monotogonere kumbe.
And you know, Ghana, but that day my palms were sweaty because I didn't know if I was going to make it. So I was so nervous.
Sure.
And my wife said, be careful because they might fine you.
Oh, if you don't do
something
it correctly.
That's not allowed. So when the process was completed, they said, come and sit here on the sofa, Mukwasha.
So it means you scored.
But my wife has said, don't sit on the sofa under any circumstances because they'll fine you. So I said, Iowa.
Wonderful.
And then in the end she said, it's okay, you can sit.
You can now sit. Okay. Wonderful. I would love to know your radio career, obviously. That's why we're sitting here. But I think we start off on a very good note, very interesting with Mukwasha. But we've also heard you speaking about a daughter who you said is linked to one of the biggest stadiums in Zimbabwe. Care to share with us?
Yeah, we've got one daughter, and over the years we've had 6 other relatives, children that we've looked after over a period of years. But we have one daughter, she's Rufaro, and the name came from me because I've always thought it's a beautiful name. It just sounds beautiful. It means joy.
Sure.
But also there's another connection, because Rufaro Stadium is one of my most special places in the whole world, because I've covered so many football matches there, done commentary on so many games, and of course it's where the country's independence celebrations were. So it's a deep name. So I insisted we must call this girl Rufaro.
Wow, wonderful. We are with Steve Vickers, and of course this RadioFiles. Privileged to be sitting with you, Steve. I know you said at the beginning that we've worked together for a while, but it's always amazing sitting with a man with such great wealth of information. And like you said, you are a teacher at heart, and you've taught us so much. Now let's go back to something that you mentioned at the beginning, that you are a math teacher. Now, classroom, did you actually get into the classroom in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, I taught at Warren Park High School in Harare, and I wanted to have a full-on experience to go to a school where I'd learn a lot about Zimbabwean culture. So I was a maths teacher there. Some of the classes were like 50 kids, and I said, wow, like you look and the kids just keep on going back, the rows keep on going back and back and back, so big. In fact, one of them, I think, was 54, was the biggest class that I had. And in UK, where I trained, you'd have 25, maybe 28 kids. So it was big. And I learned so much from the teachers, so much from the students there. So it was a big education. They taught me about Zimbabwe, and it was a rich experience. It really was. So I taught there for 3.5 years, and came out having experienced so much there.
So you were teaching math?
Yeah. Wow. Which is difficult. And I would give the kids extra lessons after school. They'd come and sit, some of them under a tree, and some of them did well. And teaching is, you really have an impact in people's lives as a teacher, because even now, this is like nearly 30 years later, some grown men or women will come and say, Mr. Vickers, do you remember me?
Wow.
And now this boy who used to be wearing shorts, he's got a beard now, and he thinks I'll recognise him, but then when they tell me their name, I'll normally remember. And you have such an impact as a teacher in kids' lives, you know.
Absolutely. So from classroom to the studio, how did that happen?
I was in radio before I got the chance to come here, which was supposed to be for 2 years. Then I was going to go back to the UK, but I never did. But 1995, I'd been here for 2 years, and that's when Zimbabwe hosted the All Africa Games. It's the biggest sporting event that we've ever hosted. And there I linked up with Farai Mungazi from the ZBC Radio 1. He then went on to work at the BBC in London for many years, and he was putting together a sports team. He needed an athletics commentator, and I was able to do that. That's one of my favourite sports. Also did football analysis with Charles Mabika at the same time back in 1995, and covered the All Africa Games. It was just so exciting, those 2 weeks, as we had athletes from all around the continent, including Maria Mutola. She was the star from Mozambique, and I did a commentary on that I think got played on ZBC Radio 3 and on BBC as well as our live coverage on Radio 1. And I used the words, we salute the majestic, the magnificent Maputo Express as she was crossing the line. So that was a nice little soundbite there.
Wonderful. So, please divorce yourself from the classroom to going full-time into broadcasting. Is that what you did?
At first I was doing both, school during the week and radio at the weekends, and then with Farai we started our own company, which was kind of a new thing, a revolutionary thing at that time. We started our own media company, and we bought the commentary rights from the PSL. So we had the rights for commentary, and we bought airtime from ZBC, from Radio 1, where we had been working. So it became an independent production. It's probably one of the first that there's been in Zimbabwe. And then we sold it to advertisers, and it was working like that as an independent production. So that was quite a new thing, because that was 1997.
Wow, independent production back then. Wow. Very interesting. I had the privilege to meet Farai. Well, first of all, in the corridors at Pocket Hill, but then when Capital 100.4 FM was about to launch, he came and trained the team. I was in Mutali at that time, and I asked to come and sit in his training, because I knew the man, just like you, would also give us a wealth of information. So brilliant, and very interesting that you guys already had the intelligence and the brains to become an independent production company. Speaking about that now, we associate the name Steve Vickers with a lot of football or soccer, should we call it. You did say that you love athletics, but any particular reason why this love for football?
Yeah, I think I owe that to my dad. He brought me up going to loads of sports events in the UK. He would take me to football, to cricket. Cycling was one of his favourite sports. Athletics, we'd run together. So yeah, that was where the deep love of sport came from. And also what I noticed here, coming to a different culture, sports like this universal language, and when you talk sport, you can connect with anybody, whatever background, whatever race, wherever they're from. Sport brings people together. It's very powerful.
Now, you already mentioned that you witnessed Maria Matola. You've been to so many other sporting activities, but let's try and zero in on some of the big ones and the big names that you met through sport, through commentary. And I would also hasten to ask, have you ever been starstruck?
Yeah, nearly, I guess. There was one special day I remember I interviewed Kirsty Coventry, now the minister, in the morning, and then for BBC Radio, and then in the afternoon I interviewed Sunday Chidzambwa, who was the Warriors coach, and I said, well, this job is just amazing, you know, we get paid for this, talking to these stars. We had a whole load of cricket stars here, some of Australia's biggest players, England's biggest players, India's stars have been here as well, so loads of those as well. When I went to BBC for a couple of years back in 2007, got a chance to talk to Didier Drogba. He must be one of the biggest names, and then I got to talk to Maria Matola as well. And at the All Africa Games, loads of big stars, and at the Africa Cup of Nations too, a chance to talk to big players as well. Although you'll only get a few seconds with them at those big events.
I can imagine, yeah.
Loads of them, and also in the arts as well, because I did quite a bit of arts and culture stories for BBC Africa Radio as well. So I interviewed Tuku several times as well, and a lot of other big musicians here. But if we are starstruck, we mustn't let it show.
So you get starstruck inside. Let me take you back now to the days of the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, your radio career. Take us through that. Which radio stations, where did you start, and when did you start?
Yes, I started there in 1995 at the time of the All Africa Games. A few months later, we brought back a Christian discussion program that Farai Mungazi had been presenting and producing on Radio 1, and we rebranded it. It was called In Search of God. It was an open-ended discussion on Christian issues, and it was a very big show. Ran on Thursday nights, and ran for 7 years, that one, and then ZBC, then the station moved to Bulawayo, so we discontinued it then. That was a huge show. I did the breakfast show. Kelvin Sifalani, another of our legends, was doing the Friday breakfast show, and he moved then to Radio 3, Power FM now.
Yes.
And he said, Steve, I want you to take over my breakfast show. Okay. And I said, wow, what an honor. And he said, no, I know you can do it. And I did that Friday morning breakfast show for several years. Loads of sport. Got to do television as well. There was one morning I was finishing my breakfast show on radio on a Friday morning, and a producer called Abraham Napulu, who was a TV producer,
yes, I remember him, yeah.
He said, Steve, we're starting a sports show. I need you to come and record the first episode. I said, okay, when? And he said, now. I said, well, I haven't shaved or anything. I haven't washed my hair. He said, no, you need to do it. So that was called Sports Round Table, and it ran for a few years as well. And we talked again to stars like Kirsty Coventry and other sports people in many sporting disciplines. And that was a Sunday afternoon show. And in all of these opportunities that came my way, I always gave it my best shot and gave it 100%, because that's one thing that I've learned, because I've got a 35-year career in broadcasting.
Wow.
Whatever you get, you've got to give it your best every time. However you're feeling, always prepare properly, always give it your best, because you never know what it will lead to next. And I even read the sports news for a short time on the main news on ZTV, breakfast sport, just for a short time as well. But it's been a whole range of opportunities. Did the drive show as a stand-in presenter as well on Radio 1.
Okay.
I even read the news on radio a couple of times when the newsreader didn't pitch up.
Interesting.
And the guys would come in the studio, I'd be doing the breakfast show, and they'd say, read this.
Wow.
And you were supposed to, it was supposed to be a 10-minute bulletin, but I was fast, and
also it was shorter.
and you had to take it slow, but I did it like in 6 minutes, and I think the second time I'd managed to stretch it to 7 minutes, but I couldn't go at that slow pace. Yeah, so it wasn't easy at ZBC. The conditions were arduous. sometimes, but the wealth of opportunities that they gave us, they were huge.
Absolutely, and we'll always treasure those. Some of the names that pop up from your days at ZBC, what are some of the names that you remember?
Wow, going back in those days, besides Farai and Kelvin, Georgina Godwin, she was a very popular presenter. Those days, Benya Badza, I worked with in sport. He left the country. John Masuku was one of the bosses and still around and still in radio, very influential in the careers of many. And then there were guys I'd bump into, not know very well, but guys like Peter Johns that I would get a chance to say hi to now and then as well. Joseph Hussein and Kudzima Rudza, got to see him as well. Yeah, so there were big names there.
You mentioned In Search of God, and when we listen to your morning show, it's very easy to pick up that there is some Christian values in your broadcast. How did that come, and how do you balance being on radio? Because for some, it's an industry where it's difficult to maintain your Christian values, but you have kept that from the days of Radio 1 up until now.
Yeah, I've been a Christian 40 years this year. I was only 18 when I became a Christian, when I was saved, when I was at college. So I'm a very strong Christian and owe it all to God. And I think it's an advantage in this industry because you can get big-headed. You can go in the studio, people send you comments saying love your show and so on, but you'll see a true perspective if you fear God. In fact, the very first show that I did in 1986 in the UK at a small station there, it was a Christian discussion program as well, so that was my first step into broadcasting. Some people kind of think that Christians should stay away from the secular world, maybe even have a Christian radio station, but I kind of see that it's better to be a Christian in a worldly setting and then to play your part there, to make the impact that you can, because you'll reach a lot of people. At the same time, they're watching you, and you've got to be careful that your lifestyle matches up to what you're saying on the radio. Sure.
I already jumped to the issue that you're on Star FM. You are hosting the Sunday morning show, but we also know that you are heading sport for Zim Papers Radio. We also know that you are also heading programming on Star FM. But I want to take you back a little bit. How did your journey with Star FM begin?
Yeah, this was a dream that we had even from the 90s. We're saying one day there'll be a commercial radio station. When is it going to happen? And my wife and I, we moved to the UK in 2007. BBC offered me a short-term contract there, and then that turned into a full-time job. I could still be there if I wanted, but we just didn't like the lifestyle. It's not the same in Zimbabwe, where you have big gatherings, big weddings, big family gatherings, and you just interact with so many more people here than when you're in the UK. London's got millions of people, but it can be a very lonely place. So we took a big leap of faith to come back, and that was 2009. We came back to Zimbabwe. Things were still not great at that time, but we said we'd rather be here. And also kind of said, if something's going to happen in radio, you've got to be in it to win it.
For sure.
And it was only, and there were two things I said I'm not going to do when I come back to Zimbabwe. I said, I don't want to do football commentary anymore because it's such hard work learning the names of the players and you have to research for hours. And I said, the other thing I'm not going to do again is a breakfast show. And a couple of years later, that was my typical Sunday. Was breakfast show on Star FM and then going to do commentary on Supersport. So never say never. And also thanks to you, because you're the one who picked me for the recharge for the Sunday breakfast show all the way back in 2013, and it's still here. So the dream of Star FM came. We've been waiting a long time. Tich Mataz, another legend, was putting the team together, and he approached me as head of sport. But again, it led to other opportunities like the breakfast show as well.
Sure.
So yeah, this has been a great journey, and we can't believe it's 10 years now.
10 years already, yeah, of course. And so this was 2012.
Yeah.
What was the feeling of being part of history? The first commercial radio station, working with some of these big names like Maya, Mbovs, Tich himself. What was the feeling inside of you?
It was huge, you know. and just this facility, these studios, still the best in the country, and the whole buzz that we had at that time of starting something new, it was amazing. And those big names like Tijmet as well, amazing to be working in a team with him, and Boffs, who was on Breakfast. So it was such a big thing. It was really exciting for the sport. I wanted to take our coverage of sport to another level, because at that time the ZBC had got a ban on covering local football for some reason, and that played right into our hands, because we went big on the local PSL, interviewed coaches and players, and did commentary, and took local sports coverage to another level. And then the journey went further, being head of programming. I see myself as a senior figure, and it's good to work with the young people and give them some guidance, and hopefully for them to learn something.
Steve, I'm about to let you go now, but I cannot let you go without asking this question about the technology that you use today compared to the technology that you were using back in the days. What's your comment on that?
It is amazing, and now people who are starting in radio now are coming into a totally different environment. Let me start with communication. When I started in 1986, you could only interact through letters. And if a listener really liked you, or if they didn't like you, they'd take the trouble to write a letter. And you'd hardly get any of them, but you get a few. But it was just us talking, and listeners were listening. And now with the WhatsApp interaction in the studio, with the social media, it's completely different. And it's been a challenge for me to get active on social media, but it's a must now to listen to this interaction and make sure that you note what listeners are saying to you. Then in terms of the technology, we use the reel-to-reel tape, so younger viewers might not even know what that is unless they've seen it in a movie maybe, or an old school video. So we'd edit stuff with this tape, and we'd cut it with a razor blade and stick it together, and now we're in a digital world where in a fraction of the time we can edit stuff on computer. At ZBC, we got an outside broadcast van when I started out there in 1995, and we could go anywhere in broadcasting.
And it looked flashy.
Yeah, and we had roving mics, and we could go on the pitch and interview the players afterwards, or go in the crowd and interview the fans. It was new technology in the 90s. And then now with the cell phones, 1999, Kelvin Sifalani had a cell phone. I was working with Charles Mabika, another legend who I worked with for many years. And we experimented if we could do reports using a cell phone. And we did, and it worked, and we could do...
And it was wow.
Yeah, we could cover all the games in one day. We could do commentary, a main commentary, another one on a phone, and get reports from elsewhere on the cell phone, because otherwise it was landlines. First time I was getting reports from our man in Bulawayo, Muzi Hadere, another legend of sports broadcasting. He would go to a phone box at 5:20 on a Sunday or a Saturday, and he'd wait for me to call him.
Wow, that's
from the phone box. Yeah, that's like in 1997, 1996. So things have changed so much in terms of technology. Now we can even do an interview with WhatsApp voice notes, and we can get perfect sound quality. So the advances, what I've seen in 35 years, have been incredible. And now radio's not even only about talking; it's about visuals as well. So it's a whole new world, and there's still lots more to come.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Steve. But I would also want you just to say advice to a prospective broadcaster. What are the 2 or maybe 3 things that you would want them to know? Maybe not in detail, coming from a veteran broadcaster like you, experienced broadcaster, 35 years is not a joke. What should they know?
Well, I think first of all, be yourself, as Tuku would say. You are unique. Listen to other radio presenters, but be yourself, and you might pick things from others, but God has made you unique. Second, one thing I say is to study your field, become an expert in your field. So if you're talking of broadcasting, listen to how other presenters do it, and really analyze, do they talk when the music's on? If they do, how do they talk? When do they talk? Do they talk before the song ends. How do they do that? Study your field. And there's so much information around us now. If you've got data, you can go online, you can learn about radio or any other field that you're interested in, whatever it is. But what I find is a lot of people don't implement what they hear. So listen, study your field, but implement it. Even if I'm talking of marriage advice, you can Google and get marriage tips that will give you a fantastic marriage. But if you don't listen and implement,
Sure.
it won't make any difference at all. So study your field. If people give you feedback, implement it, because that will make you better. I don't like to be told more than once. If BBC have corrected me on something, I never wanted them to tell me a second time, and I never had to.
Interesting.
And then the personal discipline, it's so important. Your work ethic. Sports and generally in radio, we don't work 8 to 5. We work unsociable hours, weekends especially if it's sport. And so you've got to be prepared to put in a lot of work. Some people just can't handle it. They love radio, but they can't handle the difficult hours that we work. But you've got to work so hard. Research and get your facts correct, especially if you're working in news or sport. You've got to put in a lot of hours of research to get everything right. And pray, definitely. Get that vision from God and follow it. And probably a final thought, don't give up. Because I could have given up 30 years ago or 25 years ago and I never would have got this far. I could have given up last year or last month even. I might have been discouraged, but don't give up. Just keep on running with that vision. Always give it your 100% and don't give up, because many people have. And if you've got radio or broadcasting in your blood, that's what you need to be doing.
Sure.
And you won't be satisfied if you're working somewhere else. So really, however discouraged you get, don't give up.
Mukwasha Wedu Steve Vickers, thank you so much for sparing time to be with us. We are tracking the footprints of radio in Zimbabwe, broadcasting. We call this Simba as we try and see the footprints. Where have we been? Where are we today? Where are we going? So thank you so much for adding your voice to this one. It's been great, and we can only wish you the best in all your future endeavors. Thank you so much, Steve.
Hey, thanks a lot, Lee K. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.